Tyler from Aspire Sports, and I'm going to give you 5 wide receivers that I think you need to draft for the 2021 fantasy football season that are currently being slept on. Now, it's very early. You hear me say this all the time, right? It's very early, so things can change. But right now, Fantasy Pros, they have 14 experts that have submitted their 2021 fantasy football rankings. And if you're not familiar, basically they take those rankings, divide it, and find the average. So these are who is currently being slept on, in my opinion. So let's go ahead and get into it. And the first one here is going to be Stefan Diggs. Stefan Diggs is currently coming in as wide receiver number 7. Stefan Diggs this season finished as wide receiver number 3, okay? So he led the league in receptions, led the league in targets as well. So why number 7? To me, I think that's a little bit too low. Didn't have a full offseason with Josh Allen and still put up these ridiculous numbers. The Bills had this little stretch where they kind of struggled a little bit. Next season, I honestly think he could finish as wide receiver number 1. Now, I'm not going to draft him over, say, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, but he's going to be the 3rd wide receiver taken off of the board for me. So for him going at number 7, I think that's honestly pretty good value, especially over, like, I would draft him over DK Metcalf, AJ Brown for sure. Like the other two, sure, Calvin Ridley, I would still draft him over Calvin Ridley. DeAndre Hopkins is right there with him, but I think Stefan Diggs should be the 3rd wide receiver taken off the board. And the second wide receiver for me that I think is being undervalued is Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen right now ranks as wide receiver number 16. This year, prior to his injury, he got hurt week 14, finished out the game, but then played basically half the snaps week 15 and missed week 16. He still finishes wide receiver number 11, but from weeks 1 through 14, he was wide receiver number 8. Last year, he finishes wide receiver number 8 as well. He has Justin Herbert, right? Justin Herbert is pretty decent. He's pretty good. He looked pretty good this season. Sure, he might have the sophomore slump like a lot of these quarterbacks have, but I still think he's going to be good. I think he's top 12. So number 16, I think is a little bit too low for me. And especially if it's like full point PPR, I would definitely put him inside the top 10 just because he's a PPR machine. Before he got hurt, he was number 2 in targets and receptions in the NFL. Now, he didn't have over 1,000 yards at that point, but that's what you're going to get. So in full point PPR, I definitely would put him inside my top 10. And right now he's currently at wide receiver 16. So for me, I think that's pretty good value, Keenan Allen. Coming in at wide receiver number 3 for me is going to be Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper is currently ranked as wide receiver 21. For me, that's just too low, especially if Dak comes back. Now, I do think if Dak comes back or they have somebody else that's pretty good come in, then he's probably going to move up, but I don't expect it to go much higher than, say, wide receiver 15 if he even gets there. I think it'll be in like 15 through 18 range, and still, for me, that's too low. He's a top 12 wide receiver if Dak is there. 2019 finished inside the top 10. This year, the 4 games that Dak played in full, he was wide receiver number 3. So he can put up those numbers. Now, I'm not going to say he's like a top 5 guy, but definitely I think he finishes inside the top 10, in my opinion. Definitely inside the top 12. So that's where I'm going to be drafting him. And he's going to go outside of that. So he's good value in my mind. So Amari Cooper, wide receiver number 3. Coming in at wide receiver number 4 for me is going to be Diontae Johnson. Diontae Johnson is currently ranked as wide receiver number 24. Now, if you've listened to this channel before, you know I'm a Steelers fan, but I'm going to give you facts, right? So in the 12 games that he played in full this season, there's 2 games he left early, and then another game he didn't play because he was hurt. So in the 12 games that he played in full this season, he was averaging 13.9 fantasy points per game. That would rank as wide receiver number 11 on the season. So in those games, he was averaging 11 targets per game, right? So now the Steelers are a little bit pressed for cap space. They've had a couple guys retire, so it's kind of freed up a little bit of cap space. But I don't think that they're going to be able to sign Juju back. He's going to want too much money. They're not going to be able to afford him. So you have Juju leaving through free agency, and now all of his targets are up for grabs, right? I think Diontae Johnson has the volume to make him basically a borderline top 12 wide receiver that's being drafted as basically a wide receiver number 3. So a guy that can finish near the top wide receiver number 1, top 12, and you're getting him for tremendous value. I hope he stays here. I really hope come draft time he stays here because it's great value. So Diontae Johnson, wide receiver number 4 for me. And before I get into the last one here, I'm just going to give like 2 honorable mentions. It's going to be Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins. Now they're ranked pretty low. I'm assuming it's just because we got to see what happens with Joe Burrow, because there is a chance that he doesn't play at the beginning of the season. And when does he come back? So A big thing to monitor throughout the offseason is Joe Burrow's health and his progression towards the start of the season. Because if he doesn't play, do we like these guys that much? No. But if he is there week 1, then sure, especially T. Higgins should move up a lot. So 2 honorable mentions. So let's go ahead and get into the last one here. And the last wide receiver for me, wide receiver number 5, is going to be Jerry Jeudy. Currently, you have Courtland Sutton going as wide receiver number 26, and then Jerry Jeudy wide receiver 40. So I think that's how it's gonna work out. People are gonna be higher in Courtland Sutton for obvious reasons. Last year he was gonna be a stud and then ended up tearing his ACL, right? But I think right now Jerry Jeudy is the better value in my opinion. Jerry Jeudy this year was second in the league in drops and was 4th with his the lowest catch percentage in the league. Now, obviously those are a little concerning, right? But I do think as a rookie wide receiver, I think that gets better. He improves upon those numbers, right? This year, you had no offseason, which didn't help him. And then you had, obviously, we have Courtland Sutton getting hurt week 2. And you also had Drew Lock getting hurt week 2. So that's going to completely throw off any chemistry that they had. Jerry Jeudy had some pretty good games this season, some blow-up games, and finished off with a really good game. Week 17 with 5 catches, 140 yards, and a touchdown. So, in my opinion, on what I've watched from him tape-wise, he's an extremely good route runner. You also have Tim Patrick was on a 1-year deal this year. So did they bring him back? I don't think that they do. I think that they roll with Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy on the outside and then Hamler in the slot. So Jerry Jeudy on the outside, I think this offense could be potent, has the potential to be potent. It just depends on Drew Lock. Is Drew Lock going to step up? So I think he does, and I think Jerry Jeudy is going to finish as a wide receiver number 3, who's being drafted as a wide receiver number 4. So I think he has the potential to definitely return value for you on draft day. So with that being said, if you do like this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you for watching. There will be plenty of videos to come. Thank you, and have a great day.